Have you ever looked at your life and quietly wondered, when did this become my life? Not because it was terrible, not because everything went wrong, but because it isn't the life you once imagined. Most people don't wake up one morning and decide to abandon their dreams. It happens much more quiet than that. One postponed decision, one promise delayed, one compromise that feels temporary, and then another, and then another. Years pass. The person you plan to become slowly fades into the background, replaced by someone who simply learned to adapt to whatever happens next. The frightening part isn't that life changes. Life is supposed to change. The frightening part is how easily we stop noticing that we're moving away from the person we once wanted to be to someone we are. Not through one catastrophic mistake, but through thousands of small negotiations with ourselves. Negotiations that seem harmless in the moment, until one day you realize that you've been keeping every commitment except for the ones that you made to yourself. Today we're going to look at why that happens, and more importantly, how you begin to find your way back. When people look back with regret, they often search for one moment that changed everything. One bad decision, one missed opportunity, one mistake they wish that they could erase. But life usually doesn't work that way. The future is rarely redirected by a single dramatic event. It's redirected by ordinary days. The days that we tell ourselves, I'll start next week. I'll have more time later. Things will settle down eventually. Those thoughts feel reasonable. In fact, they often are. The problem isn't postponing something once. The problem is when postponement quietly becomes a pattern. Because every day we delay a promise we made to ourselves, we teach ourselves something. We teach ourselves that our own priorities are negotiable, that our own future can wait, that who we hoped to become is less important than whatever feels urgent today. Eventually, we stop arguing with those compromises. They become normal. And without realizing it, we are no longer building our future. We're simply maintaining our present. And that's how people slowly drift away from the life they once wanted. Not through failure, but through repeated acceptance of not today. The direction of your life is rarely determined by your biggest decisions. It's determined by the small decisions you repeat until they become your identity. Most people think confidence in yourself comes first. It doesn't. Confidence usually comes afterward, after you keep a promise that you've made to yourself. And the opposite is also true. Every time you repeatedly break one of those promises, something begins to change. Not just your schedule, not just your progress, your identity. Maybe it starts with something small. You tell yourself you'll take a walk after dinner. Tomorrow comes, and you don't. You decide you finally begin writing that book. The notebook stays closed. You promise yourself that you make that phone call. You convince yourself that it can wait one more day. None of those decisions seem important by themselves. But your mind is paying attention. It quietly begins asking, if I don't believe in my own promises, why should I believe the next one? That question rarely happens out loud. It becomes something more dangerous. It becomes a habit. Eventually, people stop making promises to themselves altogether. Not because they lack in their dreams, but because experience have taught them that those dreams probably won't survive another Monday. Builders understand something very different. Every small promise you keep is a vote for the person that you're becoming. And over time, those votes create your identity. One of the hardest truths to admit is this: most of us become incredibly dependable for everyone else except ourselves. We show up for work. We keep our appointments. We meet deadlines. We remember birthdays. We help our friends. We honor commitments that we've made to other people. But somehow the promises we make to ourselves always seem negotiable. We'll skip today's walk. We'll postpone learning that new skill. We'll delay the conversation we needed to have. We'll tell ourselves that there's always next week. At first, it feels responsible. Life does get busy. People do need us. Responsibilities are real. But when this becomes your normal way of living, something quietly disappears. It is the person you hope to become. It slowly gets pushed to the back of the line. Day after day, year after year, until one morning you realize you've spent decades building everyone else's priorities while leaving your own unfinished. The tragedy isn't that you cared for other people. It is that somewhere along the way you decided your future could always wait. Builders refuse to make that trade forever. They understand that honoring your own commitments isn't selfish. It's how you become someone capable of serving others even better. Most people believe they failed because they lost motivation. But motivation is rarely the real problem. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes. Some mornings you wake up excited. Other mornings, you don't. But if your future depends on always feeling inspired, your future is standing on unstable ground. The people who eventually build meaningful lives don't wake up motivated every day. They wake up convinced. They are convinced that the promise that they made to themselves still matters. That conviction changes everything. It changes how you see ordinary days. You no longer ask, "Do I feel like doing this today?" You ask, "Is this still the person I'm trying to become?" Those are completely different questions. One is controlled by emotion. The other is controlled by identity. Our character didn't suddenly become a different man because he felt inspired one Saturday afternoon. He changed because he finally stopped waiting for inspiration to arrive before he honored a promise that had been waiting for him. The people who eventually fulfill the life that they imagined aren't necessarily more talented. They simply stop negotiating with what they already know is important. That is conviction. And that conviction quietly outlasts motivation every single time. When people imagine changing their lives, they often picture dramatic moments. A major breakthrough, a life-changing opportunity, a single decision that changes everything. But most meaningful lives aren't built that way. They're built on ordinary Tuesdays, or ordinary Saturdays, or ordinary evenings when nobody's watching. Because identity doesn't grow during extraordinary moments. It grows during repeated ordinary ones. One walk, one phone call, 1 hour spent learning, one promise kept. None of those actions seem remarkable by themselves, but they never remain by themselves. They accumulate. Just as years of postponement quietly changes your direction, years of consistency quietly changes it back. That is why rebuilding your life rarely feels dramatic at first. It feels surprisingly ordinary. And that's exactly what makes it so powerful. Because extraordinary futures are almost always the result of ordinary decisions repeated long enough to become who you are. The future isn't built in moments of inspiration. It is built in moments of consistency. And every ordinary day gives you another opportunity to become the person who you once hoped you would be. There is one final question. If years of broken promises slowly caused you to stop trusting yourself, how do you begin trusting yourself again? The answer is surprisingly simple. You stop asking yourself to become a completely different person. Instead, you become someone who keeps one small promise, and then another, and then another. Think about how trust is built between two friends. It isn't built because someone makes bigger promises. It's built because they consistently keep the promises they already made. The same thing is true with yourself. Every promise you keep becomes new evidence. Evidence that you're becoming dependable to yourself again. Evidence that your word still means something. Evidence that the future you imagined is still possible. Our character didn't rebuild his confidence the day he walked back into his workshop. He rebuilt it the day he walked back in and stayed. The next day, he returned again. Then he shared what mattered with someone he loved. His identity didn't change because of one emotional moment. It changed because his actions finally began agreeing with his intentions. That's how trust is rebuilt. Not through inspiration, through evidence. One kept promise at a time. So tomorrow, don't make another promise to yourself. You've probably made enough already. Instead, remember one. Think back to a goal you once cared deeply about. Maybe it was learning a skill. Maybe it was building something with your hands. Writing a book. Starting a business. Becoming healthier. Spending more time with your family. And then ask yourself one honest question. Does this still matter to me? If the answer is no, let it go intentionally. Don't carry it as quiet guilt for another 10 years. But if the answer is yes, don't create a new version of it. Reconnect with the original promise. Then tomorrow, do one small thing that proves to yourself that it's still alive. Not because one day will change your life, but because one kept promise changes what you believe about yourself. And what you believe about yourself determines what you will do next. Don't spend tomorrow planning the life you want. Spend tomorrow becoming the person who keeps promises. The life you wanted may be farther away than it once was, but that doesn't mean it's gone. The dreams you quietly set aside, the skills you stopped practicing, the person you hoped to become, none of them disappeared in a single day, and they don't come back in a single day either. They return the same way they left, one decision at a time, one ordinary day at a time, one kept promise at a time. If you're wanting to stay relevant in a world that no longer forces you to build a meaningful life, remember this: the future isn't built by the promises you make. It is built by the promises you keep. If this episode helped see your own journey a little bit more clearly, subscribe. This is D.B. Lewis, and I will see you in the next one.